Another round of reviews, and this time we're taking a look at the Park Güell. Barcelona's second most visited site behind the Sagrada Familia is on everyone's top 10 list. But despite that popularity, there are still those visitors who leave one-star reviews about the park. And I think a lot of those could have been avoided if people had known a few things beforehand. So in this video, we're taking a look at some of the worst reviews for the Park Güell to find out if that park is really only worth that 1 star. Or somebody didn't do their homework. And at the end, I'll be giving you my top tips to make sure that you won't be complaining about your visit. Honestly expected more. We arrived super sweaty just walking up to the park. Then within the park, it felt like a hike. Super exhausting. The irony of being a tourist is that there are many, many other tourists high naked. And I'm assuming that's gonna be an autocorrect from hiking, because I've never seen anybody naked in the park. Definitely not allowed. So it might have been a nice little treat for them. Hiking in the park, super crowded. The few interesting things that are able to see are cool, but compared to the effort of looking past all other tourists and the exhausting hike to get there, it didn't feel worth it. All right, so right away we've got some things with the amount of people and the hike to get up there. And what we'll talk about a little bit later are some of the best practices in getting over to the Park Güell, but you need to understand that it is not in the center of the city, so getting over there is a little bit more complicated, something that I talk about all the time in terms of bookings and everything that you have. And also, it's one of the biggest things to see in Barcelona, so you're gonna see a lot of people all around, especially over in the park. That's why you've got those booking systems, and that's actually the reason why they created the booking system. Before 2013, they didn't have bookings. It used to be free to get in, but there was like 9 million people going into the park. And part to keep that tourism down, keep it a little bit more for the locals, and also be able to just kind of take care of the park, they put in those restrictions so there are those access points and those entrances that you need to get. Either way, depending on the time that you go, and if you're going up on a hike and it was probably hot as well, middle of the day, there's gonna be people all over the place. So that's one thing that you need to expect if you're going over to the Park Güell. I was really looking forward to visiting here. Unfortunately, due to incomplete directions from Google Maps, I was unaware that the way to get there from the metro station was up a steep hill made up of mostly staircases. Had I known this, I would have just taken a taxi. Very disappointing. So again, we're talking about the hike and getting up there. None of these so far are really about the park as a whole. It's just more of the other things, which is one of the things you need to understand before getting over there. Getting over, probably taking a taxi, best bet, easiest way to get over there. There are a lot of stairs after that metro. Sometimes you will be able to get into the escalators that might help you to get up there as well, but it is a further way. Remember, the idea of the park was to build some sort of residence for the richest people, richest citizens in Barcelona outside of the center. So it is extended out and it is in a hill. So there's gonna be hikes, there's gonna be an incline, and you're gonna be going up the entire time. Rip off. Art is to be enjoyed by all, not gold diggers. Nothing to see unless you pay 27 euros per person to get a ticket. They have a quota on ticket availability. Unless you book several weeks ahead, you have no chance. Ice cream seller is rude and makes you wait while she chats on the phone. So can't really speak on the ice cream seller or which one it actually was, but there is a picture attached to this so we can know who is that ice cream seller that makes you have to wait and is just super, super rude. But the idea that you're paying 27 euros to get into the park, that shouldn't really happen. You've got $10 entrances for that entirety of the park, and you've also got 22 euro entrances if you're getting in with a guided tour. If you're doing some sort of other kind of tour or anything like that, you might have some different prices, but going to the official site and getting those entrances are gonna be either 10 euros or 22 usually. What a waste of money that visit was. It was an ordinary park with 2 designs by Gaudi, and that's it. It was a waste of money and time. All right, so before we even get any further, 1 or 2 designs by Gaudi, the park was designed by Gaudi, but keep in mind that it was not designed as a park. So the idea that you're going over there and you're seeing something that is the finished work is not something that you're doing. There are a bunch of different roads, all of the marketplace and the main statue and everything that really is kind of the main things to see when you're over there, but it's not that there's just 1 or 2 designs. Keep in mind, you are visiting a park, but that was not the original intention. The ticket price for the park, it does not cover the ticket price for the Gaudi Museum inside the park. All right, now this one I've got to be on their side here. That's something that I've always thought is really weird. Now that you have the entrances into the park, it used to be just the very center and kind of like the monumental section of it. A couple years ago, what they did is they extended it out, and now it is the entirety of the park. So just to get in, you do need to pay that entrance price. But the one thing that I've always thought is really weird is that the Gaudi house where he lived for a large period, about 20 years of his life, that's not included in the ticket. In fact, you can get it with the Sagrada Familia entrance, but it doesn't come included with the Park Güell ticket, which is one thing that I just thought has always been super complicated, and something that would be nice if they could figure that out where you can get both of the tickets included in one. You have to buy a separate ticket in order to view the Gaudi Museum inside the park. It is better off to visit your local park. It will be more interesting. I guess you're gonna have to, it depends on the local park that you have. There is a lot of information that you can still take out of if you're going over to the Park Güell. Just getting an individual ticket and walking around, you're not gonna fully understand kind of what everything that was going into it. And that's one of the big things that I always see with reviews like this. Nobody's really complaining much about the park, but there's also not any kind of information looked at before going over. If you just find it on a top 10 list and go over there, then there's a lot of room to be kind of displeased with what you're seeing. No longer free for everyone during the sunrise. Not even possible to go there for the sunrise, even with a ticket. Used to be free. Supposedly has been 4 years since the change. Barcelona is becoming greedy with those changes, adding fees to everything and making it impossible to see the sunrise. Impossible to see the sunrise because there's nowhere else that you can go in Barcelona to see that sunrise, which would be the only thing worth 10 euros. So I don't know exactly when this was posted, but a couple years ago, yes, they did change the timings to where at 9:30 now is the first entrance into the park, and then depending on the time of the year you're coming, you have until the evening to get in, and then the hours surrounding that are actually for the people that live around in the area. A lot of people used to use a little bit of a hack of not paying to go to the park because they could go in earlier or later, they could see that sunrise, they could see that sunset, but now that isn't a possibility. It's unfortunate because it is a great view, but there are so many other places that you can go around Barcelona and see the sunrise, the sunset, that it's not just the Park Güell where you need to be over to. Places like Montjuïc, I always send people over to see from the other side of the city, looking in. You get great views and great sunsets over there. And there's even the Costarola Mountains and some of the other hills, bunkers, and places like the Mirador de Horta that actually have some great views from very, very similar vantage points. So it doesn't have to be the Park Güell for that sunrise. And it looks like with the picture, they actually saw it as well. Disappointing. 20-minute walk uphill only to find all tickets for the park are sold out. Why not put a sign at the bottom of the hill to let visitors know there is no availability? It's actually not a bad idea. My advice, make sure to check reservation tickets at least 2 days beforehand. Don't turn up and hope for the best. This is really some good advice. A complaint, I guess. The park, I don't think, should have to suffer for the fact that people aren't looking beforehand, but like I always say, there are some places in Barcelona that you definitely want to get your tickets beforehand. The Park Güell, more than anything we've seen with this hike, how far it is outside of the city, outside of that center of the city, this is the one place that you definitely want to get your tickets in advance because there's not much else that you can actually do when you get up there and there's no tickets available. I always talk about it, we talked about it with the video in Sagrada Familia, is that there are other options going over to the Hospital San Pau and maybe you can wait a little bit later. But with the Park Güell, even if you do have the opportunity to wait for a later entrance time, there's not much else to do. And the fact that you've already gotten all the way up there, it'd be a shame to have to go back down to come back up. So make sure you get your tickets in advance. I would look maybe even more than 2 days before just to have an idea. Some of the places are worth kind of moving your trips around and scheduling around some of these places. The Park Güell, if you're going over there, is one of them. Be forewarned. Some strong words. Getting to the park from the 2 closest metro stops requires long, very steep walks up to the entrances. The walk from the Vallcarca stop involves going up a series of steps, which makes it difficult for anyone with a stroller. The route from the step stops is longer, 20 minutes at best, and also is very steep uphill slog. We talked about it. It is far outside of the city. If you look at Google Maps and you're trying to get over there, you should realize that when you're looking at your route and your journey to get over there. But I do think that one of the things that you don't really know or you can't know beforehand are the differences between the two. So Lesseps is probably, for me, a little bit easier because you do have options for going up those different escalators. The Vallcarca stop does seem to be closer, but it is all steps. And one of those things that is really surprising to a lot of people when they think, I have to get all the way up to this park, but just know that you are going uphill and outside of the city. Once you get there, the mosaics are nothing to get excited about. I don't know about that one. They are random colored tiles in no discernible patterns. What we're really talking about big time are those benches, which is what a lot of people want to get over there to do and see that picture. The idea with mosaics, or what we call in Catalan is trancadís, which are those broken tiles that are put over there. Sometimes they are put into patterns, and then sometimes the idea is that it is random, kind of fitting in these different pieces of those broken tiles. But I think it's one of the cool things to actually see, especially when you get under what was supposed to be the market and that bench, what's left over, and you go and you see the different tiles that are representing the different seasons, sun, moon, everything like that. So it's not that it's undiscernible, it's just we didn't know what we were looking at. Other reviewers talk about the views. You can get the same thing from other points in Barcelona, I mentioned a little bit beforehand, without the pain of a long, hot walk. I think you're going to have to walk up or get up to some point to get those views, but either way, I might also mention the lack of washing closets, bathrooms. In short, take this off of your to-do list, okay? So not on there. A lot of times I do think it is people that see these things as we have to go over there, we have to see these things on this list of the top things to do. Park Güell is on all of those, and you know what? Honestly, if you don't want to go over there, especially after kind of watching this and hearing a little bit of the background to it, you don't have to. It's not something that is mandatory to get over to and see. Like I said, it is a little bit further outside of the city, takes a little bit of time. If you go over there, there are many, many things to see, to take advantage of. I would even argue that some of the best parts of the park are getting up and actually going into the surrounding kind of like nature, getting up to some of the highest points where you've got where the church was supposed to be built and the different crosses, and looking out to the city from there and not going into where all of these people are and everything. But if you don't want to go, you don't have to. Not worth it for the price. We went there in late October and it was very crowded. Not a lot of shots without people in the background. Again, in Barcelona, it's going to be really, really hard, and especially in October, which is a big month still to get over to because you still have a lot of that great weather. Going in the off season might offset some of that, but in the Park Güell, again, you're always going to have those people. I do get it though. It is annoying when you're trying to get those pictures on the bench or different places and everyone just keeps coming and walking in, and it's really hard to make informed lines while you're in there. There's also a specific route you have to take. If you miss it, you'll have to go all the way down and back up. What they're talking about is, again, the monumental section, which is a little bit more difficult to get into, and once you leave, you're done. But there are all sorts of ways to get around and back up, and it is really just a series of stairs. It isn't too much at all, but you do need to know that if you start to make your way down the main stairs back out towards the entrance, getting back up would be a little bit more difficult. Do not go there from 2 to 3 or else be prepared for the heat. There are buses that take you there. Yeah, buses, taxis, anything like that. And if you go in the middle of the day, obviously it's going to be the hottest part. And despite being a park with all the different trees, there isn't a whole lot of option for shade when you're in the very center of the park. So it does get very, very hot. So keep that in mind as well, and especially with all the people that are that are walking up all the way. A very overrated place, swarming with tourists and very little to do. You're basically paying your entrance fee to have a photo in the famous mosaic bench. The grounds are very desert-like, and although generally cool, I would hate to visit in the height of summer. So very similar to what we said, kind of avoid those timings of the very center of the day. I don't know when this person visited, but this seems like one of those comments where we're just complaining about something that we didn't do. If they didn't go in the actual height of summer, it shouldn't be knocked off in terms of points for something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of people, and I would agree with the idea of that monumental section that you're getting into. It seems to be where everybody swarms over and is basically what you're paying to get into. But now that the whole park is really what you're paying to get into, again, go to some of those less visited places. Go along those old roads, walk through it. It is much more than just taking that picture in front of the dragon or in front of the benches out there. While it is a great picture, there's a lot more to the park. It looks nice. Only Spain's still stupid restrictions. On the net, they write that dogs are allowed and you will come here and you will not be allowed to go to the most interesting places. So trick you into paying and then like us on the spot. In general, Spain is nice except for the attitude of local people. I'm deeply disappointed with the Spanish. It is still Franco's Spain and they are far from the EU. Wow. All right. This doesn't seem to have to really do anything with the park. We can leave the whole Franco comment to the side, but I highly doubt that his priorities were people's dogs getting into parks when he was around. But sticking with kind of what we're talking about, I actually had to go and look up the restrictions because I've seen dogs in the park all of the time. And again, it's that monumental section and the most important areas where those dogs are not allowed, but up around into the other areas, and there are some resting areas, some picnics and everything, dogs are allowed to go in, and it says so on the site, but it clearly does say that they're not allowed inside of that monumental section or near any of the more important parts of that park. Maybe it's nice there, but there's a lot of people like us, we and our children only find out at the entrance that there are no tickets. Overall, it's a big failure because we have lost half a day and money to get there. So again, the whole idea of booking online, you need to know that this is one of those places that you need to book online before getting over there. What they do is they give you a timed entrance and they give you a 30-minute window to get into the park. So even if you are running a little bit late, you do have that 30-minute window, but knowing that going at the door and trying to buy those tickets, most of the time you're probably not going to be able to find them. So like we saw before, at least 2 days beforehand, but you do have options of reserving those tickets online and avoiding all of these problems. So after looking at some of the worst reviews for the Park Güell, I want to give you some of my top recommendations so that what those people had to go through don't happen to you, and you can have an amazing time while you're here in Barcelona if you choose to go over to the park. So the first thing that I think you need to know is that you need to know what you're getting into. And this isn't really just for the Park Güell, but this is for anything in general. We always see these big lists of top 10s and kind of make a checklist of we have to hit up all of these things to have seen the city. Going over to the Park Güell is an awesome experience if you know what you want to see. But if you're just doing it to check off a list, know that it is not a park that you're going over to, or at least that's not what the park was intended to be. It was intended to be a residency that is turned into a park. A lot of times I think that confusion really changes how people experience what they're going over and what they're seeing. The second thing that I think you can do is you can book a tour. If you don't know what you're seeing, or if you want to make sure that you understand everything that you will be seeing around in the park, there's a lot of different tours that not only will take you into the park, but do some more Gaudi experiences where you can see the Sagrada Familia, the Park Güell, or maybe one of the houses all at the same time. And you can get around and see a lot more of Barcelona, understanding all about it. The other thing that you need to know ahead of time, and this is probably my biggest recommendation for the Park Güell, is to book ahead of time. You don't want to get over to the park and then find out that there aren't any tickets, as you saw with a lot of those reviewers. What they did when they changed all of those rules to make those entrances was to limit the number of people that were going in from about 9 million to between 2 and 3 million that are going over there. Now they do give you a window of those 30 minutes like we talked about before that do allow you to get into the park even if you're not there exactly at your time. But you don't want to get over there because there is not so much going on around the Park Güell. There's not other places that you can get to pretty easily and see them in the meantime if you don't have those entrances right when you're there, and you can get in a little bit later. The other thing that I highly recommend is going directly to the official site and booking those tickets to the Park Güell. Not only are you going to have those official prices, but you're going to be sure that you're going to have the official tickets to get in, again, saving you a lot of stress and a lot of time as well. Other things that I would really recommend, as we saw, it is further outside of the city, and most of those reviews were all about the long, extensive hikes and the heat and getting over there. One of the things you should do is you should probably go in a taxi. And going in a taxi, I know, is a little bit more expensive, but if you're going with a group, it really isn't that much more expensive, but it will save you, one, a whole lot of time and a lot of that exertion. Getting over to the Park Güell, and especially in the middle of the summer, and trust me, I've done it, and just sweating isn't going to let you enjoy the experience as much as if you were fresh, just getting right outside of that taxi. And those taxis basically drop you off, not right at the door, but just a few blocks from actually getting over there. The taxi stands are just a walk down from that main entrance, and it makes it really easy. If you're not going to take a taxi, take the metro. Get over at least as far as you can on those metro stops. And I know I mentioned it before, but the Vallcarca stop is a lot steeper and there are a lot more stairs. So even though it does look like it's closer, Lesseps is probably the one that I would recommend getting off at and then just walking over. And once you can see the escalators, you usually can take those escalators straight up, and it saves a lot of that walking as well. That's if they're working. Last but not least, don't go in the middle of the day. The other thing with that is the heat, and with all of the people and being directly in the sun, if you avoid all of that, you do have a lot of better times to go. earlier in the morning. Again, starting at 9:30 are those first entrance tickets. But one thing that I've found is actually going much later in the day towards the closing time gives you a lot less people, and you can really explore it almost like you're by yourself. And it usually gives you some of those nicer temperatures as well. A lot of these things can really be avoided, and not making those typical mistakes that all tourists make when they come over to Barcelona gives you a much better experience, not only at the Park Güell, but all over the city. And if you want to know more about how to avoid all of those top tourist mistakes, watch this video next where I break them all down.